Hola a todos y bienvenidos. Welcome back to the Bruja Cat channel. Today, we have a Halloween special episode. So, as we continue in our series about Brujería, today, I'm going to list off every single kind of divination in alphabetical order. Yes, really. Let's do it. Now, obviously, that would be a really long video, and it would probably be impossible because there would be thousands and thousands in this list. But god damn it, we're going to give it the old college try. This is my compilation from my notes. I wrote down every single kind of divination that I could find. We're doing it today. Let's go. Now, of course, this is going to be a summary list, so we're not going to be going in full depth about how to perform each and every single one of these kinds of divination. But I just wanted to give this as a reference list for anyone that's interested in doing divination this October. Oh, and make sure you practice witchcraft responsibly, please. Don't go around summoning demons. If you go somewhere haunted, bring protection. Don't be inviting mischievous or trickster spirits into your home, alright? These are things that are supposed to be common sense. Let's see, don't go desecrating people's grave sites at the cemetery. I know y'all want graveyard dirt, but trust me, you don't need it. And it's probably not from a graveyard, you're grabbing it from a cemetery, which means that you're literally unearthing people's corpses. Stop it. This is a fair warning. Halloween in October is a great time for people to literally exploit the dead. Please be respectful of the dead. Don't go desecrating people's grave sites. Ultimately, Halloween is about family. Yes, really. This is a time to be honoring your ancestors, to be honoring the spirits of the dead, and those who have deceased, who have passed on. So ultimately, Halloween is essentially about family. Let's keep it a wholesome and family holiday when you go practice voodoo. Now, before we get into it, Stormy has a special message. Please subscribe and follow me on Patreon. That's all. If I didn't miss any unique, specific, or esoteric forms of divination, please let me know in the comments. Now, this is a list that I've comprised in my notes just for my own research over perhaps the last 5 years or so. So we're essentially going to be reading my notes from my grimoire, and I'll make them available for anyone on my Patreon. So if you like, you can get the VIP tier on my Patreon, where I will post these actual pages from my grimoire for you to take notes yourself or to simply view the pages also. Ready? Starting from A to Z. AEROMANCY. This is essentially divination from observing atmospheric conditions such as the wind, thunder, meteors, rainbows, aerial visions, clouds, etc. ALECTROMANCY. This is divination involving birds. So this can be anything from owls, crows, roosters, and observing flocks of birds. Astrology. This is a form of divination that's very popular and involves the position of the stars and constellations. This can also involve your zodiac sign. There's also different forms of astrology as well. You have African astrology, Asian astrology, and different Copernican astrology as well. Nowadays, reading people's horoscopes according to their zodiac sign or their birth chart is very popular, especially in tandem with other forms of divination, such as tarot. Augury. This involves interpreting a certain object for an omen in order to foretell the future. Augury is a form of premonition that I'll mention later in this list. Belomancy is an ancient form of divination dating back to the Babylonians, where arrows, or at least darts, would be interpreted by how they either miss or hit their target. Bibliomancy. This is divination according to the interpretation of a certain text or book. Bibliomancy is especially popular with religious texts and reading passages, such as from the Bible, the Torah, or the Quran, and can be worked in tandem with numerology. CARROMANCY. This is divination involving the reading and interpretation of wax. The way that a candle melts, pops, or reacts to different ingredients. It can involve keeping the form of the wax and reading the different figures from that, or melting the candle entirely and then trying to interpret the way that it melted around the form of the candle. This form of divination is especially popular when working with spirit guides or deities. CARTOMANCY. This is the very popular form of divination involving the use of some form of card deck. Nowadays, the use of the tarot deck is very widespread, but there are also a whole variety of novelty oracle decks that are specifically made. Now, I'll cover the origins, etymology, and creation of the tarot deck in a different video, but essentially, it came from playing cards. So yes, even your regular casino deck for poker can be used for cartomancy. Furthermore, there's even a whole variety of different kinds of decks that one might use. For example, in Latin America, the BRISCAS deck, or Baraja Española, that has its origins in Spain, is very popular for divination, along with the Mexican Lotería cards, which have originally been used for the game of bingo, but also do have their origins in the Marseille tarot deck. Clairsentience. This is any paranormal, mediumship, or psychic technique involving the use of sight, hearing, or touch. Clairsentience can be divided into 4 main categories: clairvoyance, clairaudience, precognition, and psychometry. Clairomancy is a form of sortition, such as casting lots, in which the outcome is determined by means that normally would be considered random. This form of divination is ancient and can even be found in the Bible. However, clairomancy is a bit of an umbrella term, and other examples of techniques would include astrogalomancy, which uses dice as a form of divination but traditionally used knuckle bones; kumalak, which comes from Central Asia that uses beans, which is comparable to Central American favomancy that uses beans or maize and casting them in order to interpret for divination purposes. Cowrie shell divination. This is a form of divination that's very specific to African traditional religions and Latin America. There are also different types of cowrie shell divination according to the technique. Erindinlongun, or simply known as dinlongun, is a form of reading the cowries according to how they land, either mouth up or mouth down. This is a specific form of divination under Santeria or Lukumi, where anywhere between 16 to 20 cowrie shells are used to represent the 16 proverbs, and how they land either mouth up or mouth down will represent either the major ordun or the minor ordun. And then there's the very widely used and popular rune stones that come to us from Norse paganism. Runestones can be used either for casting lots in clairomancy or on top of different lithomancy charts, which I'll explain and go into more detail under L for lithomancy later in this video. Dowsing, also known as radiesthesia, is the divination technique involving the use of a rod, stick, or pendulum. Feng-Shui. This is the ancient Chinese form of rearranging or placing furniture and other objects in order to read the qi or energy in the room. This is another form of divination and reading energy. Fractomancy. This is the form of divination involving the interpretation and reading of the different shapes of broken items. Geomancy. This is the form of divination that involves reading the lines of the earth. This can be different formations, patterns, figures that are made in the earth, such as rock, dirt, or sand. But other forms of this involve reading the rings inside of a tree. Graphology. This is the interpretation of one's handwriting. This is also very popular in certain psychological techniques. Gyromancy. This is the form of divination that involves spinning or circular motions. This can mean the spinning of a pendulum, for example, or getting dizzy while going around in a circle. Gyromancy can be used during certain dancing rituals or when you're working in a coven or societe during ceremonies. Hieromancy, and it involves the interpretation of burnt offerings or slaughtered animals. Hieromancy can also be used in tandem with fractomancy, such as reading the bones in a bonfire. Hydromancy. This is the form of divination that involves water. Now there are 3 main categorizations of hydromancy. First, we have hydrotoscopy. This is the interpretation of rainwater. This can either be rain right from the sky, rain puddles, or water scrying. Second, we have leconomancy. This is the divination through interpreting sounds or ripples made by stones and other objects dropped into water. Leconomancy can also include the interpretation of objects and how they float or sink in the water. And thirdly, we have PEGOMANCY. This is the divination by interpreting sacred waters such as springs, pools, wells, or fountains. This is mainly stagnant water or pools of very flat water. I-CHING. This is an ancient form of Chinese divination or meditation, according to who you ask, that reveals patterns of change through deep introspection and intuitive thought. Lithomancy. This is a form of divination that's catching popularity recently. Lithomancy involves the use of gemstones, crystals, and casting them or examining them under the light, tossing bones or stones, or pulling them from a bag. Under lithomancy, different forms of astrology, such as your zodiac sign, can be used in tandem. For example, there are the 12 houses of lithomancy, and different sorts of charts that can be used. Different techniques or items that can be used under lithomancy involve, or are not limited to, gemstones, crystals, runes, river stones, cowrie shells, casting lots, or reading bones, etc. Metagnomy. This is a form of divination that involves the use of a trance-like state. This can either be achieved through psychedelics, possession, or hypnosis. Molosophy. This is the form of interpretation of reading moles or freckles and different discolorations on the skin. This is more popularly used under different techniques of palmistry, but was infamously used during historic witch trials to find a witch's mark. Molybdomancy is a form of divination that includes molten lead or tin, which is then immersed into cold water for interpretation. Molybdomancy can also be found in Turkey, where it's used as a spiritual cleanse, but can be dangerous due to burns or lead poisoning. Necromancy. This is the form of divination involving the communication with the dead or deceased. Now, necromancy gets a bad rap in media such as movies and TV, but it can be as simple as ancestor veneration. Numerology. This is the form of divination by interpreting numbers. There are different signs of numbers and the significance to that culture according to which numbers that is given. Typically with numerology, there's some sort of a cipher to give that meaning or interpretation to these different numbers. Numerology is really popular in tandem with bibliomancy and can be used in different forms, such as dominoes. Numerology was really popular under the Renaissance period when different alchemists were trying to decipher the bibliomancy of the Bible, such as reading Psalms and trying to find numerology within those passages. Obi divination. This is a form of divination that's specific to African traditional religions where they use 4 pieces of kola nut to ask simple yes or no answers. Now, in different parts of Latin America, like the Caribbean, coconuts can be used as a substitution for kola nuts. Oculomancy. This is divination by interpreting the eye itself. So this can involve interpreting the pupil, the iris, and the windows to the soul. Oomancy is a type of divination that involves the reading or interpretation of an egg or different parts of the egg. Most popularly in Latin America, they're known as huevo limpiezas or huevo readings. Osteomancy, or widely known as bone reading. It can also be called clairomancy, which involves the interpretation of different bones, either through casting lots, like in lithomancy, or reading the bones under a fire, such as in fractomancy, which is why it's called a bonfire or bone fire. ONEIROMANCY, also known as interpreting dreams. This can also be known as lucid dreaming. A lot of people keep a journal next to their bed whenever they wake up and have different prophetic dreams. Now, oneiromancy, or dream interpretation, is very subjective, and it depends upon the person's individual subconscious. Oracles. This is divination by using a psychic medium, such as an oracle, which was very popular in ancient Greece in order to communicate with the deities, gods, spirit guides, or other entities. Ouija, or spirit boards. Now, these have their origin in the Song dynasty of China with the use of Fuji, or a technique known as planchette automatic writing. Spirit boards in and of themselves are a form of necromancy. They gained popularity once more in the United States during the Civil War around the 1880s to 1890s, where you find the first patented Ouija board. And in its heyday, it gained popularity around the 1920s and is still very popular in mainstream media today. The main use of these spirit boards is a means of communication with the dead or deceased in order to receive paranormal messages. Now, it should be noted that Ouija boards aren't the only form of spirit boards, but they are by far the most popular. Palmistry, or the reading of hands. This can involve not only the reading of the lines, but also of the knuckles, fingernails, and the entire palm. Under palmistry, all these different lines, structures, freckles, and like I said before, under moliosophy, have different significances to how you're interpreting your subject or your client. We're about halfway through our list. Let's take a little cafecito break. In the comments below, let me know what's your favorite form of divination and which one do you use most often. I personally really enjoy casting lots, so I have my own little items that I'll use here for casting lots. I'll usually cast them onto boards like this. This is just a simple chalkboard, or I will use an even larger one that I DIY'd from a TV tray table. That way, I can use bones that will fit. So if you're interested in making your own spirit boards, I would recommend simply getting a form of chalk paint and then using that on a simple TV tray table of some sort. Or if you're really crafty, get a simple piece of circular or rectangular wood and start wood burning. I think this is a great idea because then you can customize your board to however you like and decorate it however you choose. I simply prefer to use chalk because it's more customizable, and then you can erase the graphs and create different circles or different forms of divination. And in fact, if you have chalk, you don't even really need a board, you can just use the sidewalk. I've even used just a stick and some dirt. So just remember, no matter what form of divination you use, understanding the technique is more important than having fancy tools. Okay, now back to the list. A premonition. This is usually a warning of a future event such as an accident or a disaster and is very common in dreams. Premonitions are different from a prophecy, however. A prophecy is a vision or revelation usually given by a deity or passed down through history. So the main differentiation here is that a premonition is something that may happen in the future, while a prophecy is something that will happen in the future and is linked to fate. However, it's very common and it's almost a trope now, especially in media like movies and TV, that people often misinterpret prophecies or premonitions. They do happen, just not according to how you think it will. Psychomancy. This is the form of divination involving soul reading, interpreting a person's soul, morals, values, character, or beliefs. Very popularly today, psychomancy is known as shadow work when someone is interpreting or doing a deep dive into their own psyche, such as their subconscious. Pyromancy. This is the form of divination that involves interpreting fire and fire safety. Now, pyromancy is pretty common in the art of divination, but now we're going to get even more specific when talking about pyromancy. Now, bonfires, classically known as bonfires, were traditionally used for different methods of pyromancy, such as cosmomancy, which is a big umbrella term for burning things for the purposes of divination and interpretation. Pyromancy can be used in tandem with a bonfire if sacrificial objects or animal remains are being cast into the fire. And then at the end of the sacrificial ritual fire, NECROMANCY can be done by removing the unburnt wood or coals and then interpreting the remaining ashes for divination. Now, a very specific form of ash interpretation is called LITHOMANCY, which is divination by studying the burning of incense and the patterns of smoke. This is usually done during funeral wakes or in remembrance of the dead. So as we're getting more and more specific, I'm going to rapid fire list off about 15 different categorizations of pyromancy. Ready? Here we go. Allomancy, divination by casting salt into fire. Botanomancy, divination by burning herbs and plants. Daphnomancy, also called Empiromancy, is the divination by burning laurel leaves specifically. Osteomancy, and in this case also known as fractomancy, remember, is divination by using bones, including casting them into fire. Plastromancy. This is of Chinese origin and is divination by heating carved pits into turtle plastrons. That's the underside of a turtle shell. Scapulomancy is bone divination by casting the scapula specifically into the fire. Sigilomancy is divination by burning straw with an iron. Pyroscopy is writing on a sheet of paper and burning it to interpret the ashes. Lychnomancy is divination by interpreting the flames of 3 candles arranged in a triangle. And then lastly, we have the very specific interpretation of different parts of the fire or the flame. So, capnomancy is the divination or interpretation of the light and the shape of the flame. So how it dances, how high it is, the color of it. Spotomancy is specifically observing the smoke of the flame or the fire. And thracomancy is observing or interpreting the burning of the coals. And xylomancy is observing the burning of wood. Okay, that was pyromancy alone. Also, if you want to see these detailed notes from my actual grimoire, go check out my Patreon, BrujaCat, and I will have them posted on there for my VIP patron tier. Now, you ready to get back to the actual list? Skyomancy. This is divination involving a familiar or spirit guide. This can be an animal that appears to you, not one that is summoned. Now, skyomancy can also be involved in the use of familiars in tandem with other forms of divination. So if you do have an animal familiar, come up here, kitty. Yeah, good girl. Such as my animal familiar, Stormy. Say hi, kitty. Yeah. Then they can actually help you in your spell work or divination as well. I love her so much. Who's a good familiar? You're a good familiar. Next up, we have scrying. This is a form of divination that can be used alongside scrying mirrors. Scrying in and of itself is seeking a vision through or gazing into a transparent, translucent, or reflective object. In Mesoamerica, using jet or onyx black mirrors or crystal balls were very popular for gazing and scrying. And more infamously, under the categorization of scrying, we have the witch's glass or looking glass, which must be covered when not in use. This is a form of divination that's very famous, especially in media like movies and TV, that involves a form of psychomancy. So this is diving into your own personal subconscious, and so the witch's glass or looking glass is only for the individual to gaze into, and that's why it must be covered when not in use. For many modern witches, this is a form of quote-unquote shadow work. Spasmatomancy is a form of divination that involves interpreting convulsions, especially during possessions. Now, when I mention convulsions, this has no link whatsoever to forms of epilepsy or other disorders. Spasmatomancy specifically refers to mounting a spirit such as the Loa or Orisha and other spirit guides, or possession by spirits like ghosts or demons. So please be informed that this in no way is referring to epilepsy or other forms of neuroses. Tasseomancy. This involves the interpretation of tea leaves, grounds of coffee, and other sediment in your cup after drinking. So this may involve sediment in your wine glass or the herbs and spices left over after your cup of soup. Water witching. This is a form of dowsing that uses a similar tool like a rod to locate not only water, but other things like ore, gems, oil, or even bodies. And now at long last, we have gone from A to Z. And so as we're reaching the end of our list here, we're going to be circling back to the beginning. Zoomancy. This is the interpretation of the appearance or behavior of certain animals. So, like I said before, under the A's, electromancy is the divination of observing birds. So that would be also categorized under zoomancy as a large umbrella term. And then last but not least, zygomancy. This is the divination by using weights and measures, so countermeasures and trying to interpret them according to their weight. So thank you for watching this entire list. Of course, a lot of these forms of divination are very specific and there are certain ways that they should be done, so please make sure you research them if any interests you. And then as a disclaimer, of course, every culture is going to have their own unique form of divination and different techniques. Every different culture will have their own ways of doing things according to their technique. And of course, this is nowhere near a comprehensive list of every single kind of divination form in the entire world. This is simply my list of every kind that I could possibly find in my research. So if you liked this video, make sure to give me a thumbs up. It'll help me tremendously with the algorithm, and make sure to follow me for more videos in this Brujería series. However, now that it's October and we have the thinning of the veil, we have Halloween, Samhain, Dia de los Muertos, All Saints Day, it's going to be a really busy season for me, so I may not be posting as much, and I most definitely am not going to be as active anymore on social media. This by no means means that I'm quitting, it just means that I need a reprieve so I can take care of my own spiritual needs. So even though I do love making these videos for you guys, I need to take some time for myself as well, because there's a whole lot of projects that I've been meaning to do, and there's a lot of stuff that I just haven't found the time to do. No matter what, it's always more important to make sure that you're taking care of your own spiritual needs before you're able to help mentor other people. Plus, I think the spiritual community and the witchcraft community online is super toxic and judgmental, so I also need a break from that, and I need to just separate myself from that. As someone who's a very sensitive person and who feels a lot, who absorbs a lot of energy and then gives out a lot of energy, I definitely need a break from that. So I will be posting on my social media like Instagram and TikTok, but it's just going to be more lighthearted rather than educational. As for my Patreon, I do want to make sure that I am still giving back to my patrons who help to support me, so thank you so much for that. I will make sure to be responding to your messages, and if you need any mentorship, I'll do my best to respond promptly to any questions. And now that it's October, with Halloween, Samhain, Dia de los Muertos, All Saints Day, and the overall thinning of the veil, please make sure that whatever you're conjuring, whatever you're practicing, practice safely. But yeah, I think that's it for now. Ashe bendiciones, luz y progreso, and I'll see you when I see you. Bye!